Hi everyone. This is chapter 24 in the McKinley Anatomy and Physiology book, all about the urinary system. This is part one and just mostly goes over structures. Um, so structures of the urinary system, pretty simple. Kidneys, of course, which filter the blood. The ureters transport blood from the kidneys to the urinary bladder. The bladder stores the urine until it's ready to leave the body, and then the urethra that eliminates urine from the body. There's something to be careful of here. You got two that are very similar, ureters and urethra. Okay, so you could think of it alphabetically. The E here, the H, E comes before H, goes to the ureters before it goes to the urethra. Okay, that's I usually like to think of it alphabetically. So the urinary system sits through here, through the abdominal pelvic region. That the floor of the pelvis is urinary bladder. Um, kind of nearer to the top, way in the back, in the posterior, outside of the peritoneum, actually, outside of the peritoneum of the abdominal pelvic cavity is where the kidneys sit. And they kind of actually sit on either side of the spinal column. That's how far back they are. Of course, the role of it is to eliminate wastes, regulate levels of ion, regulate pH of the blood and all tissues, really all fluids, um, blood pressure, eliminate molecules. So, uh, formation of calcitrol, which helps control calcium levels, erythropoietin, which controls the blood cells and types of blood cells. Also has a little bit of a ability to engage in gluconeogenesis. Okay. Again, talked about where it is. It sits retroperitoneally, so way in the back, the posterior wall of the peritoneum, not really inside the peritoneum, outside the peritoneum. It's so far back there. It has a fibrous capsule. Around that is a fat layer. Then a fascia, which again is like another capsule or another connective tissue membrane around it. This helps to anchor it to the structures, and then another layer of fat. So layers of fat help to cushion it. You can kind of see them here, the layers of fat. You can tell that the kidneys are on either side of the vertebral column. So they are very far back there. They're very, very posterior in the peritoneum. So the kidney is broken down into two sections, the renal cortex and the renal medulla. Um, we've seen these terms before, cortex meaning the outside of it, medulla, the interior. It's similar to that here. There are what are called renal columns and renal pyramids. Renal pyramids are structures inside the kidneys that will filter it, get rid of reabsorb water using a high sodium, high salt concentration. There's the renal lobe. This is the components of the pyramid and the renal columns. And the renal sinus. Remember, the sinus is a space. So it's a space. What fits into that space is the renal pelvis. The minor and major calyces, okay, individuals calyx, and of course the renal pelvis. So looking at this, we have the medulla in the interior here, where you see find the pyramids right there. It's the medulla. The lighter tissue in between each one is the column. This is kind of the same tissue as the cortex, although it's not in the cortex. Cortex again is outside here, okay? And then you got calyces. You got like minor calyx here. See how these two little funnels go together to make this funnel, and then this funnel falls into this big funnel, so it's funnel after funnel after funnel. The minor calyx starts to collect the urine at the far end, the papilla, renal papilla, and then it sends it, filters it, or funnels it down until eventually it gets down to the ureter, where it's going down to the bladder, urinary bladder. Now, the functional unit of the kidney is called the nephron. Remember, a functional unit is that structure or that series of structures and tissues that perform the function of the organ, and there are millions and millions of them, so that the organ performs that one function overall. In this case, what we're talking about is the nephron. The nephron begins with the renal corpuscle, which is sort of a bulbous, rounded region like a spherical shape um, within the renal cortex. Two parts to that are the glomerulus and the glomerular capsule. Okay, so the glomerulus is fenestrated uh, capillaries. Okay, it is comes in to the renal corpuscle via the afferent arteriole. The blood does. I'm sorry. I guess so does the vessels, but the afferent arteriole, and then blood exits versus what's called the efferent arteriole. There's an internal layer called the visceral layer, external layer to the capsule now. The capsule is what surrounds the glomerulus. It's sort of a circular structure, like I say. It's spherical. Okay. So being spherical, like the Earth, it has poles. It has a vascular pole where the arterioles come into the glomerulus, and a tubular pole, which is where the fluid fluid comes out that's being collected. So here you've got the renal corpuscle. Okay. So here you've got the renal corpuscle. Inside the glomerulus, this capsule on the outside, the vascular pole, the tubular pole over here. So the fluid comes out of the blood, goes into the capsule, and like a funnel goes into this tubule here. Okay, and this tubule is called the proximal convoluted tubule. All right, the renal corpuscle, the proximal convoluted tubule. From there, it goes to the nephron, and then to the distal convoluted tubule. So the nephron loop, let's go over to that then. So the nephron goes to the distal convoluted tubule. So convoluted, so it winds around like this. Proximal convoluted tubule. Now it goes to the nephron loop, and it loops down into the medulla. Okay, it has a thick portion and a thin portion. So what's leaving the first part of the tubules, the proximal convoluted, is called the descending limb. It's descending into the medulla, okay, and then makes the curve, and then an ascending limb is again ascending back up into the medulla. And then you have another set of tubules here. Okay, these tubules are the distal convoluted tubules. So distal convoluted tubules right here. And they enter into or empty into the collecting tubules in the collecting duct right here, this big long one. So the nephron loop, distal convoluted tubule, right? So there's kind of a little bit more closer up view of it and looking at the histology of it as well. So you've got the renal corpuscle here, and then the tubules. Those are like the two parts of it, the corpuscle, the tubules, like the two parts. And again, the corpuscle has the glomerulus on the inside, the glomerular capsule on the outside, collects the fluid coming out of the blood, sends it into the proximal convoluted tubule, where a lot of things are reabsorbed, and then it goes down into the nephron, the descending loop, makes the curve, and goes back up into the cortex again. There are two types of nephrons, the cortical nephron